So, once upon a time, there was this gigantic pot of frogs, and most of the frogs didn't realize it, but somebody was turning up the temperature in the pot, but they were doing it so slowly that if it continued, what would happen is all those frogs in the pot would be boiled without even realizing it. But the thing about this particular pot of frogs was that some of the frogs were pretty smart and they were realizing that somebody was turning at the temperature in that pot and that eventually they'd all be boiled. And the problem was that most of the frogs were just swimming around trying to make it because there wasn't enough lily pads. And the few lily pads that they had in the pot were being occupied by the bullfrogs, who they had elected to be their leaders. So, when the pot did eventually boil, all those frogs that were sitting on the lily pads would probably be safe. So, yeah, the frogs in his pot that realized the problem were trying to figure out what to do. And their first inclination really was to sound the alarm and to try to tell those other frogs what was happening. But most of the frogs were too busy swimming to pay attention. But some of the frogs got really scared and they jumped out of the pot. But the problem was that there were all sorts of predators, like snakes, guarding the outside of the pot, just in case any of the frogs tried to escape. So it seemed like no matter what they did, they were gonna get boiled alive if something different didn't happen. So those frogs who realized what was going on started looking at the bullfrogs and how they were sitting all comfortable on their lily pads while everyone else was swimming around trying to survive. And they were trying to ask those bullfrogs what they were doing about the issue and trying to see if maybe they were behind the temperature being turned up. But those bullfrogs were just ignoring the frogs that were trying to ask them about the temperature. And after they were asking about that, all sorts of other stories magically popped up. One of the stories was saying that there was something wrong with the water, and that was being caused by too many frogs pooping in the pot, and that eventually a hole would erode in the pot and cause all the water to leak out. And another story was that there were too many frogs breathing, and it was causing the air above the pot to thin, and that eventually none of the frogs would have any air to breathe. And finally, there was a story about all the frogs eating up all the bugs, and they were trying to blame the reduction in bug population on those frogs and saying it was all them and that the bullfrogs had nothing to do with the bug population. But yeah, that would be an imminent disaster as well. But pretty much all those frogs that raised the alarm about the real issue in the beginning, knew that those other stories were just made up and that they were trying to distract from the real problem.